What's going on, guys? This is Sal from the YouTube channel Comicpop. Rob asked me to stop by and talk about some of the most OP moments in Spider-Man history, and I was more than happy to oblige, so let's jump into them. The first one I want to talk about is from Amazing Spider-Man number 328, written by David Michelinie with art by Todd McFarlane. This one is fun because it's in the middle of two separate events. The first one is the Marvel-centric event Acts of Vengeance, while the other is the Captain Universe saga of Spider-Man's adventures. So the setup here is that in Acts of Vengeance, the supervillains all got together and traded superheroes. So in the beginning of this story, Sebastian Shaw of the Hellfire Club has been tasked with defeating Spider-Man, but rather than get his hands dirty, he decides to hire the Incredible Hulk to take care of the job for him. Luckily for Shaw, the Incredible Hulk was in his gray Mr. Fix-It phase, which means he was more than willing to get his hands dirty for a dishonest buck. Hulk goes to New York City and starts tearing things up, which does get the attention of Spider-Man and results in a little bit of a fight. Spider-Man displays an increased augmented strength due to the Captain Universe ability, which catches the Hulk by surprise. At this point, Bruce Banner's personality starts to leak through, so the Hulk decides to table this fight for another day. He names the time and the place, and then takes off. Round 2 results in an even bigger fight on Roosevelt Island until some kids wind up walking in the crossfire. Spider-Man, desperate to keep them safe, lands an uppercut on the Incredible Hulk, knocking him into orbit? Using another newfound Captain Universe power, Spider-Man flies out to meet the Incredible Hulk in orbit and returns him safely back to Earth. Grateful for not being left to die in the cold vacuum of space, the Hulk calls off the job and then moves on, leaving Spider-Man to wonder just what in the heck is going on around here. But that's a story for another time. For sucker punching the Hulk into space and mitigating his temper, not to mention a knockdown, drag-out fight that is super cool to look at because of McFarlane's pencils, I would say this counts as an epic OP moment for Spider-Man. This next OP moment requires no augmentation, just straight up spider powers from Amazing Spider-Man number 270, Spider-Man vs. Firelord. Written by Tom DeFalco with art by Ron Frenz. Former Herald of Galactus and infused with the power cosmic, Firelord has given the entire Avengers team a run for their money. In an earlier story, Firelord had been humiliated by Spider-Man taking his staff away from him and throwing it into the East River. And so Firelord returns to Earth to get revenge on Spider-Man. This entire issue is one huge fight scene, where Firelord throws everything he's got at Spider-Man, and Spider-Man desperately trying either to get away or rescue civilians who are caught in harm's way. The entire first half of the fight is just Spider-Man jumping out of the way of Firelord's blasts. Eventually, the fight leads to a construction site where crews are about to demo a huge building. Spider-Man narrowly escapes, leaving Firelord inside before a crew member decides to level the entire building. Enraged by the attempt on his life by pathetic humans, Firelord fires wildly from his staff. A stray blast blows up a gas station and levels an entire city block of abandoned buildings. Desperate, humbled, and out of ideas, Spider-Man decides to take on Firelord head-on. In a blinding flurry of speed, strength, and ability, Spider-Man attacks Firelord from all sides, desperate to keep Firelord at bay until the civilians can escape and maybe some help can arrive. Until Captain America's hand on Spider-Man's shoulder indicates that he's won, and Firelord is down. This one's OP because Spider-Man single-handedly defeats a Herald of Galactus. This next one's fun because it's very silly. It comes from Silver Surfer number 14 and involves the Silver Surfer feeling sorry for himself and flying around New York City. And it was produced by Stan Lee and John Buscema. Spider-Man's on his way home when he accidentally snags a web line onto the Silver Surfer's passing board. There's a bit of a mid-air tussle before Spider-Man plummets to the ground. Not wanting to kill the poor schlub, the Silver Surfer fires a blast of power cosmic at the fire hydrant below. The sudden geyser of water cushions Spider-Man's fall, but bruises his ego. An enraged Spider-Man gives chase to Silver Surfer, and what follows is an epic rooftop fight across the city. The National Guard becomes involved, attacking the Silver Surfer with reckless abandon. Ultimately, Silver Surfer saves a little boy who was caught in the crossfire, and Spider-Man learns a lesson about, I don't know, judging a book by its cover or something. For me, it's OP because Spider-Man went toe-to-toe with the Silver Surfer and walked away with nary a scratch. This one is a classic because it comes from Amazing Spider-Man number 1, and this fight is featured on the cover, written, of course, by Stan Lee with art by Steve Ditko. Unable to cash checks from his wrestling career, while also wanting to live up to that power and responsibility thing from Uncle Ben, he decides to audition to work for the Fantastic Four. For a salary, of course. Unable to break into their private elevator, he decides to go the more conventional route, through the window, which triggers their high-tech super science security system. Once he gets through that, though, the real fight begins, as he takes a major punch from the Thing to the face. He tosses the Thing like an action figure onto the Human Torch, and then webs up Mr. Fantastic's gigantic elastic hand. The Invisible Girl goes invisible and attempts to sneak up on him with a lasso for some reason, which triggers Spider-Man's spider sense. He winds up using the lasso against her and spins her like a top. Suddenly, the Human Torch encircles Spider-Man in a ring of flame, which Spider-Man easily leaps out of. Spider-Man's plan was to bide his time until Human Torch's flame went down, but Mr. Fantastic puts a stop to the fight and asks what exactly is going on here. They reveal they're a non-profit organization, which Spider-Man scoffs at and leaves disappointed. He picks apart the entire Fantastic Four one by one, and while Human Torch does give him a run for his money, I have no doubt Spider-Man would have figured out a way to put him out. And finally, in one of the most OP displays I've ever seen in continuity, Spider-Man picks apart the entire X-Men. And yes, even Wolverine. Written by Jim Shooter with art by Mike Zeck, in Secret Wars number 3, select members of the supervillain and superhero community have been sequestered on a far distant planet known as Battleworld. Magneto is off on his own, and the X-Men are musing whether they should join him because humanity will never accept them, which seems kinda self-defeating, but what do I know. Spider-Man hears only the last few moments of the conversation and drops in to stop them from turning coat on his superhero comrades. Or so he thinks. He drops through the skylight and in one move with both hands he takes out Cyclops and Professor X. Spider-Man webs Colossus' face before he can clobber him and Rogue to a nearby pipe, keeping her from flying by. He outmaneuvers Nightcrawler and douses him in a heaping pile of webs, and just before Wolverine can get the drop on him, Spider-Man literally just backhands him across the room. Spider-Man leaps out of the way of Cyclops' concussive blasts and makes his escape. Unfortunately for Spider-Man, Professor X comes to and removes the entire altercation from Spider-Man's mind. Look, he takes out 5 members of the X-Men before Professor X mind whammies him, so I'd say that's pretty OP. And that concludes some of Spider-Man's most OP... What was that? One more? Alright, one more. In Marvel Comics Civil War number 7, written by Mark Miller with art by Steve McNiven, Spider-Man switches sides from Iron Man to Captain America, and in a climactic battle between all the superheroes, Spider-Man sets his sights on Mr. Fantastic. But in order to reach him, he has to get through 4 different superpowered characters. In a stunning display of power and grace masterfully depicted by Steve McNiven, Spider-Man takes out Bishop, Doc Samson, Radioactive Man, and the Blizzard before dealing a crushing blow to Mr. Fantastic himself. Before being kicked into unconsciousness, Reed Richards watches in awe and remarks aloud, "Amazing," to which Spider-Man replies, "Spectacular." Spectacular indeed, Spider-Man. And so those are some of the most OP moments in Spider-Man's history. You got another one? Let us know in the comments. I'm Sal from Comicpop, and we'll see you next time.